All right, here we're kind of blending the two things that we did today and, well, yesterday, really, only yesterday, but also during the warm-up. But instead of giving you a whole graph, we're just going to focus in on a single point. And what makes this nice is we can start playing around with larger numbers and not having to worry about them going off the graph. So, given the point 10, 5 is on f of x, determine the coordinates of the point if g of x is equal to 1/5 f of x plus 2. Justify your answer using sound mathematical reasoning. So, instead of moving several points, I'm going to focus just in on 10, 5. And then, just like we did with our warm-up, we're going to go left to right, focusing on one number at a time. So the first number I see is 1/5. Oops, sorry, I zoomed in a little too much. 1/5, which is outside parentheses. So if it's outside, that means it's changing my output. Well, what's an output? It's just a y value. Okay. And then I have to think, am I adding, subtracting, or multiplying this? Well, if I write something right in front, just like if I wrote 3y, it's multiplication. This is literally almost saying the same thing. So the y value, I'm going to multiply by 1/5. So if I multiply anything by 1/5, it's going to get smaller. So we call that a vertical shrink. By 1/5. So that's us explaining in words, and then just to justify what we were doing, I'm going to say y times 1/5. Just to explain, how did I get from 10, 5? 10's going to stay the same because it's an x value and I'm only changing the y. And then 5 times 1/5 is 1. Okay, so I double check, was that it? Nope, I see another number. So plus 2. That's also on the outside. So it's also going to change the y. So here's the difference between the two. If I look at the operation that's happening, for the 1/5 I was multiplying, but now I'm adding. That's going to help me tell what am I actually doing to the y. So in this case, I'm going to take my y and add 2 to it. So if I think about what transformation that is, my y-axis is vertical. So if I add 2, I'm going up 2. So that's going to be up 2. And then my justification is I'm just going to add 2 to my y's. So 10(1) would become 10(3). So you'll notice that even from the beginning to the end, my x stayed the same throughout the whole process. And that's because if I look inside parentheses, there was nothing there with the x. So nothing should happen to my x value. In this case, remember how I've been kind of stressing, we always read left to right, and it's because order does matter. We cannot go up 2 and then multiply by 1/5. We have to follow our operations left to right, or our transformations left to right, which ends up being just like order of operations, because if you think parentheses first, then you're multiplying, so your shrink and stretch are going to come first, and then you add, subtract, which would be your up and down. I want you to pause this video, try problem B, and then come back and let's see how you did. All right, I'm trusting that you paused it. So still starting with the same point, 10, 5. Still reading left to right, still justifying my reasoning, still focusing on inside, outside. So the first thing I see is the plus 5. Which is inside with the x. So that means it's going to impact the x value. All right, we have to think back to our point slope, which means I need to get that back to 0. So I would actually subtract 5 from my x. Since my x is my horizontal axis, if I go subtracting or less, that's actually going to the left. So I'm going to say left 5. And then what am I doing? I'm going to take x minus 5. So 10 minus 5 is 5, and my y value stays what it was. Then the next number I see is a minus 2, which is outside. So it's going to change the y. Okay, so if that's an arrow, not a minus. So if I think about how, well, this was a subtraction sign, not multiplication. So I'm literally just going to take my y's and subtract 2. Which if I think visually how that looks, my y-axis is vertical. So if I subtract 2 from a value, it's going down 2. So down 2. What am I going to do, Miss Ross? I'm taking my y values and I'm subtracting 2. So 5 stays the same, no changes in my x. But now I'm going to take 5 minus 2 to get my final point. That's it. So really just instead of doing the graph, we're focusing in on one point. On the back side, you're just going to work through with either your partner or your team. Help each other out. If you finish that, which hopefully you do, you have time for your homework, which is homework number 2. There was no homework number 1 because we didn't have homework yesterday. And then just make sure you come with questions on Monday. I'll be back. I'll be available in the morning, but you can also come see me or have questions in class too. Next week, really just practice. And I introduce you to some new function or new transformations that I withheld from you now just because I know it's hard for me to be gone and teach you those. So just practicing, and I'll see you guys on Monday.